I have quite the setup here. Let's see if this works. Okay, let me go ahead and share this in the group really quickly. Hey, Nicole. Good to see you. Ah, okay. That is posting. So good to see everyone today. Yeah. If you do not have the notification set, just go ahead and click the little bell, and then that you should get notified when I go live. Also go ahead and if you're joining me, if you're not a hater, go ahead and give this video a like. I forget to always say that. And I do notice that when I tell people to like and make sure that they're subscribed and make sure they're notified for subscriptions, the likes are higher on those videos. So I think I need to just remember to tell all of you that. But go ahead and like it if you want to, if you're not a hater. But anyways, let's get into today's topic. So I'm going to be talking about raising children who have a strong will. Now, as many of you know, I don't like to talk about things on the show that I have no experience in. Well, this area is something that I have a lot of experience in because I can say without a doubt that I have had many strong-willed children. I still have some strong-willed children, and about every other child of mine has had a strong will. And so I actually Googled what the definition is of someone who is strong willed. And Google said someone who is strong willed has a lot of determination and always tries to do what they want, even though other people may advise them not to. So, like, he is a very determined and strong willed person. She is a very determined and strong willed person. So, for me personally, I have a different mindset when it comes to kids who are strong willed. And I think it's because I myself am strong willed. Thankfully, I was taught from the time that I was young that we should try to please the Lord and follow him and bring, have our lives glorify him. So my strong will has actually helped me navigate the Christian life in a positive way. Because of this, I've not raised my toddlers in a way where I'm trying to break their will. And you'll see this teaching primarily in places like the Gothard camp. A lot of very strict IFB are like this. A lot of strict new IFB are like this, where they're determined, their main goal is breaking the child's spirit, breaking the child's will. And I am not for that mindset. Um, I don't want little robots because as they become adults, they're going to have to choose which path they go down. And if I've ruled over them with an iron fist, decimating their will and being tyrannical, then they will most likely walk away from God, from me, from their dad, and from family relationships. And I've seen it played over and over and over again in my life of just being in the ministry for almost 25 years. I've seen it over and over and over again. Parents that rule their homes this way usually produced bitter children who oftentimes become recovering fundamentalists, or they just turn completely away from God and forsake all things to do with God and church and religion, and they walk away from it all. So I've seen it over and over again, just being in the ministry as long as I have. Because of this, I didn't want that. I didn't want that outcome. I didn't want that fruit. So I want my kids to choose this life because they believe it's the best life. And because of that, I have to have a pleasant home. I have to have a happy home. I have to have a safe home where communication is priority. I have to have a home where they feel as if they can come to me when there is an issue or when there is a problem. It's if I rule my kids like a tyrannical dictator, that often just cuts out communication entirely. So, um, my method has been to channel that strong will into doing what is right and pleasing unto the Lord. As the world gets worse and worse, our kids with strong wills are going to have to rise to the occasion. They're going to have to challenge the status quo. They're going to have to stand against temptation. So instead of trying to break my kids' will, I try to channel that strength into good things, because raising a child who is very determined is not a bad thing in and of itself. Raising a child who is bent on, doing what they feel like doing is not bad if you teach them the right things to be doing. I hope that makes sense. So let's start off with, yeah, Nicole, there are a lot of IFB churches that I've seen. In fact, one of them that I know of, they used to run a girls' home, and he would teach that you actually literally need to start spanking a baby from the day that they get home from the hospital, because from the day that they're born, they are trying to manipulate you and they're trying to get their own way. So every time they cry, when they're hungry or when they're wet, that's just them trying to manipulate you into doing what they want you to do, which would be feed them, change them, which is utterly absurd and ridiculous. I don't think I've ever heard anything more stupid in my entire life. If I can find that clip, I will share it. If I can find that clip on YouTube, it's really horrendous preaching. Obviously, little babies, they are completely dependent on us for survival, and they can't do anything for themselves. So God gave them something called tears and crying to let us know, because they can't say words, what's going on. So they need to cry to let us know that they're hungry. They need to cry to let us know that they're wet or stinky or whatever, or their stomach hurts because they have colic or they have gas. So that is one of the worst things I've ever heard. I believe the preacher that preached it, it was back from the 70s, and there was a lot of bad teaching on the home in the 70s and 80s. And I believe because of that, it produced a lot of children who are trying to do things differently with their own kids. But not only that, but it produced a lot of children who fall into this recovering fundamentalist camp. You know, first off, there was a lot of hypocrisy in the home, so they saw that. But secondly, their parents saw them as not even as a human being with like different personalities and, you know, someone that needed to be nurtured and cared for. They saw them as basically someone living in their home that needed to conform their life and their will to the parents. And it was in an effort, I think, to make the parents look good in a way too. And so people from my generation are kind of rethinking this, and we're like, no, there's a lot of fallout from that way, the way of just going over the top and going crazy on discipline with your kids. So there has to be a better way. And once again, I think it all comes down to balance. And that's what I've tried to promote on this channel and what I've tried to teach. I do believe in biblical methods of discipline, but I also believe in balance and not going over the top and not creating scarred human beings, literally and figuratively, as they get older, and producing a godly seed that will continue on in this path of being a Baptist and not be in the recovering fundamentalist camp or have to go to therapy for the rest of their lives. So let's start with, let's say you have a strong-willed child and you have a child who throws fits, and they throw a lot of fits. Now, I will say literally every one of my kids has been through the fit stage, right? It's just part of the process. Every kid. If you have a kid who's never thrown fits, let me know, because you are an anomaly. Your child is an anomaly, and that doesn't happen very often. Every kid's going to throw fits. Now, for me personally, after raising 8 children, I feel as if this is the worst between about 2 to 4 is kind of where it is with my kids. And I think it's because it's out of frustration and not being able to communicate well. So obviously our 2 to 4-year-olds, it is important to establish who's the boss in the home. You have to listen to mommy and daddy, especially when it comes to things like safety. We don't want our kids running into the road and getting killed by a car. We don't want our kids doing dangerous things. We want them to obey us, especially because we're trying to save their lives, right? So that does need to be established. However, just realize that from 2 to 4, kids are going to throw fits and they're going to embarrass you sometime. And I've seen a lot of parents that get embarrassed because their kid's throwing a fit, and they go overboard in the discipline. Or maybe they're more overboard in public than they would be even at home. At home, it doesn't matter if their kid defies them, because no one's there to see, no one's there to question their parenting skills. And especially if you're in a church where they're over the top in this area, if you're around people in public, you're going to feel very judged if your kid throws a fit. But I just shared something in my story today, and it said, you're a parent when you're in public and there's a kid throwing fit, and instead of judging that parent, you just think to yourself, I'm so glad that's not my kid. And that's the point I am in my life. No judgment here. So if you have a child who throw fits, our first one, our first child, Tommy, was very strong-willed. And he did start talking early. He was talking at about 11 months old, which is good because I think that definitely helped. But he used to have passing outfits when, and it wouldn't even be for something like a spanking. It would just be he did not get what he wanted, whether that was his favorite toy or another kid had a toy, because a lot of this happened in the nursery. A kid had a toy that he wanted. Well, he would start crying and he would hold his breath and he would pass out. Now, when this first started happening, we were very alarmed. As new parents, we were like, what is going on? I don't remember this ever happening with my siblings. And I was the oldest of five, but I was 12 when my last sibling was born. So for a majority of the time when this would have been going on with my siblings, I would have been very small. So I wouldn't have remembered it. So we were at a loss and we actually talked to his pediatrician about this. And his pediatrician told us it's perfectly normal. Lots of kids do this. He's like, try blowing in his face when he's holding his breath. And sometimes that'll kind of jerk him out of it. But if he's going to pass out and you see his face turning blue, lay him down. When he passes out, he'll start breathing again and then he'll be fine. And that's what we did. We had to just lay him down, let him, throw his fit. And the one thing we didn't do is when he was in the midst of that, we did not give in to whatever he had wanted. So let's say he was trying to take the toy away from Fred, right? Well, we didn't like when he came to, we weren't like, we're so sorry. Here's the toy from Fred. We took it from him. Now it's yours. No, we just calmly laid him down. He passed out when he came to. And most of the time, actually, he would just be distracted and go to playing with something else. So we had to kind of, at this time, he was in the nursery and we had to tell the nursery workers, this is what's going to happen. And it did scare them the first few times, but then they soon knew what to do too. Just lay him down. He'll come to, he'll be fine, and life will go on as normal. Remember that fits will happen until communication starts. When communication starts, they tend to start dying off. Okay. So don't think that your child is just going to be like this reprobate child because they're throwing a temper tantrum. Every kid throws temper tantrums, especially in that age before they can start talking. So discipline in a balanced way. Like I said, I believe in biblical discipline. However, first of all, I don't believe in taking your anger out on your child. I do not believe in leaving lasting marks. I do not believe even that you need to be excessive with physical discipline. I think it should be rare enough where it actually does something, where you're just not, because you're angry, flying off the handle and that's your first go-to. Is just grabbing your kid and walloping them. I don't believe in that at all. So sometimes you're going to need to put them in a safe place while you calm down. Put them on their bed, close the door. There's no safety hazards around, all that. And then you're going to need to calm down until you go and address it, because they are going to learn the pattern of how to react to situations based off of how you react to them. So, and that's the biggest thing. They're going to learn their reactions based off of what you do. That is why if you grew up in a household where there was a lot of yelling, 9 times out of 10, you're going to raise your kids that same way. For sons, if they grow up in a household where their dad was horrible to their mom, they're learning that pattern as well. And it's going to be a lot harder for them to be a good husband when they get married because they've only seen a bad example growing up and they kind of fall into those same traits. I often see homes where there is physical stuff going on, especially with the dad towards the mom, the son picks up those traits as well. So remember that. Be consistent. So have certain things that there will be punishment for, and then stick to that. Hey, Marta, I was wondering if you guys are headed back yet. I noticed that you're still leaving comments somewhere, so I figured you weren't on the plane yet, but yep, let me know when you land. So, and then Nicole said her pastor said when they were like 4 or 5, spank until they stopped crying. I did not agree with it. And I will say too, I also don't believe in marathon spanking sessions that last for like hours and hours. First of all, that's seems like torture to me. Second of all, you're going to be leaving lots and lots of marks um, when you do that. And that can be very, very dangerous as well. Look up and Google different abuse cases. Um, there's been some where they had been spanking or hitting them for over an hour or something. And there's something that happens as as your wound develops into a bruise where there's a breakdown of blood cells, I believe. And if you get too many, they're breaking down too fast, it can become toxic. And that is what happened to the children. One of them that I just read about had actually been beaten hundreds of times by an extension cord, and they ended up dying. And the mom was just going crazy. She hit him with the extension cord for like an hour or something. It was insane. And it was that thing. It was because of like when the wound was breaking down the red blood cells or something, and it became toxic. So that is very dangerous. Um, I don't believe in that at all. So, but yeah, be consistent, have certain things that there will be punishment for, and then stick with that. So like in our house, this would look like if they bit their sister, that's an automatic, SWAT. If they hit, pull hair, disobedience, because I think it's imperative to teach young children, especially, they need to obey mom and dad, because there could be different situations where obedience is needful for that child to survive. And that would be like not running in the road, stopping when I say stop because there's a car coming, different things like that. Now, I have seen in some over the top teachings, like the Pearls, Michael Pearl, I've read before where he pretty much blamed the parent because they did have a child who didn't stop when they yelled stop, and they got hit by a car and they died. And he's like, that's your fault basically for not training them well enough. Well, that's just great for a grieving parent. Let's just add that guilt on to everything else. So I think that's terrible to be like that. Um, if I can teach parents to get their kids to obey them so that doesn't happen, that I will do that. But I would never tell a parent something like that for them to have to live with for the rest of their life. They already feel guilty enough, they do. And that's just pouring salt into their wounds. So sometimes I think as human beings, we get so focused on what we perceive as truth and justice that we are nasty to other human beings, and it should not be so. We should have love and compassion, and we all mess up, and we're not all perfect. It's just that sometimes when we mess up, it doesn't result in something tragic like a death or an accident or, something along those lines. So we need to be a little bit more caring for each other as moms and dads, and not be cruel, just be kind. It's not really that hard, people, really. So, but anyways, so be consistent and then learn which battles to fight. I think this is huge. Now, sometimes my older ones will complain. They'll be like, you were so much harder on us than you are the babies. Okay, well, first of all, they don't remember absolutely everything, right? There was times in their life too where I overlooked things and I gave grace. But that being said, as I'm an older parent now, I have learned, and this is the thing too, you get more confidence, as you raise children and they're turning out and they love the Lord, they love us, they're in church, they're serving him, they're going to raise their families that way. You kind of feel a little bit more confident in your methods, right? And one thing that I have done as I've gotten older, I've realized that I didn't need to make things into such a big deal. Things like even down to what clothes you're going to wear to church. So what I do now is I pretty much let the babies pick out what they're wearing to church. It's not that big of a deal. That could be a princess dress with princess shoes. If they want to, that's fine. I'm not going to fight a battle over that. Um, for us, there are bigger things that are battles. And I did name off some of the ones that in our home are important to us. Also, as they become teenagers, there are a few things that are set in stone with our teenagers, such as relationships with the opposite sex. We have some rules when it comes to that, how old they are when they get a cell phone. But even with dress, I don't have to monitor my girls' dress. We pretty much just have an unspoken dress standard we have in our home, and I'm very free with what they choose. So skirts below the knee is it. And then, but they all have their own distinct style, which I think is nice. Allie has a different style than Chloe. You can be stylish and dress modestly. And all of my girls do that. So Abby has a different style than Chloe does. They all have different styles, but they all look feminine and they all are pretty and they kind of just pick out clothes within that parameter. There's so many. There's so many things they can pick out that fall within that parameter. So that's kind of dress is a big thing in our home because we do believe that Christians should look like Christians and we are a light to the world and we're an example to the world. So, but within that parameter, there's a lot of choices you can make within that parameter. Allie is she's cute. She's like an early 90s. She loves her Converse shoes with skirts and striped shirts. That's kind of her go-to. And she looks super cute while she does it. And then all my girls just have a little bit different style. But then, opposite with our relationships with the opposite gender, phone usage and when they get a phone, different things like that. It's kind of a rule in our home, but we're not going to fight battles over silly things. We're not going to. And then give choices, especially when you have a strong-willed. There's some things that are really good to do when you've got a toddler. You're their mom and you're going to know what's going to set them off. Okay. So if you're in a situation where you're in public and there's 12 balloons and there's 14 children and your kid is one of the 14th, that it's number 13 or 14, and you've got your kid is number 14 and they don't get a balloon. Obviously, that's going to cause a meltdown. And I've seen some parents where they're just so over the top. They demand that their children just, oh, well, you didn't get a balloon, so just deal with it. They're two. They're going to have some big emotions at two. And that's another thing. I feel like parents don't realize that their kid has literally been alive for 2 years. Give them some grace. You don't need to be so hardcore. You don't need to expect your 2-year-old to act like your 20-year-old. There's a big difference. Now, if your 20-year-old is number 13 and doesn't get a balloon and starts throwing a fit, there's a problem there. Okay. But if your child that's only been alive for 2 years is dealing with all of these big emotions, seeing everyone happily play with their balloon, but there wasn't a balloon left for him, and he's crying about it, this is where it would be good to distract. Okay, go get him another toy. Get him a sucker. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to make this huge battle over this balloon that your kid didn't get when every other kid in the church got one. I'm just talking about, that's a silly example, but I've seen parents that are like, I'm hardcore parent. My kid is just going to accept it and be happy, and everyone's going to see how I rule my home with an iron fist. And they make a huge deal out about it. And then maybe that kid grows up remembering the balloon story. I don't know. Maybe he becomes a recovering fundamentalist. Obviously that lies on him. He shouldn't become a recovering fundamentalist. But, it's one of those things where he's being provoked onto that. So yeah, give choices. One thing I've done is maybe I do want my girls to wear a little bit nicer dress because it's Sunday morning. I'll say, you can have this dress or this dress, and you get to choose. And toddlers like knowing that they have a little bit of say. They're learning that, yes, mom and dad are the boss, but it's okay to take your toddler's thoughts into consideration. If they like pink better than purple, let them wear the pink one. You don't have to be like, I'm making you wear the purple because I'm the parent and I make the choices and I'm ruling with an iron fist and I like purple, so you have to wear purple. That's just ridiculous. And you think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. There's actually parents out there like that. And then they wonder why their kid doesn't like them after they turn 18, because their whole life, anything that they liked, anything that, they had an interest has been shot down because the parents wanted it their way, so it's kind of obvious. De-escalate the situation, just like with the balloon story. If there's not enough balloons for everyone and your kid's going to be one of the ones that doesn't get it, remove him from the situation. Go somewhere else. Have a distraction. It doesn't have to be automatically ruling with an iron fist, coming down hard, just squashing your child's angst or whatever. Just be smart. Be smart as a parent. Consider that they might be feeling off. Think about it. You have sick days. You have off days. You have days where you need to stay in bed all day, and you can't function quite as well. remember that your kid is going to have off days. They're growing. Sometimes they have growing pains. Sometimes I know Mondays and Thursdays are tough for my family because we're at church all day on Sunday and then they don't get to bed till late. Wednesday, they're not getting to bed till late. So I tend to have a little bit more patience, a little more grace on Mondays and Thursdays, taking into account that their schedule was off the night before. So and remember, they're just learning. They are young. So it's not all about spanking when it comes to having strong-willed kids. Do you know the Bible tells us that we are to bring them up in nurture and admonition? Nurture means that you care about your children. Nurture means that it's more than just raising them to adulthood. In fact, I'm going to look up the definition of nurture if I can. Just a minute. Let me see here. I looked this up earlier when I was tossing around different ideas for topics, but nurture means, this is the Google definition, to take care of, feed, and protect someone or something, especially young children or plants, and help him or her to develop. Okay. So that could be the process of caring for and encouraging the growth or development of someone or something. It's not just, raising them to adulthood. It's about knowing them as a person, knowing their desires, knowing their hearts, knowing their interests, knowing their passions, and steering them in that direction or in a good direction. So most of child rearing is training and talking. Oftentimes, especially when they get older, teenage years and up, you're going to be more communication, talking a lot all the time. And different personalities are different. I have one daughter who you can't really drag anything out of her. You have to wait until she's ready to open up and talk. And I've learned just not to push it. Let her come to me on her time. She'll eventually tell me it's wrong. I have another daughter who yaps from the time she wakes up till the time she goes to sleep. She probably even talks in her sleep. And then I have a couple daughters who they're very close. They want to be close to their mom. Like, they are my biggest defenders. They are on my team. They're just like rah, 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 mom, and every kid has a different personality. Every kid is going to approach things differently. But as the mom, we know our kids the best. We know what's going on. Oftentimes I've had gut feelings that something was off in some area, whether that was a relationship with an opposite gender that my kids were in. Something was off. But once again, especially when you have adults in the home, you can't push. You have to wait until they come to you. And then oftentimes we know we just have to pray as we're watching them go through things. And we pray for them. We pray for them to have wisdom. We pray for them to have discernment. And then we're there when they need to talk to us. So from the time they're little to the time they leave your home, you need to be talking with them. Life lessons with mom. I do this with Hannah all the time. She asks me questions about God. She has not yet gotten saved. She's not yet asked him to save her. And so right now I'm laying the foundation. We talk about God. When we rise, when we sit, when we lay down, before we go to bed, we're praying. We're praying for our meals. We're praying at nighttime. We're doing stories. We're just constantly putting these thoughts into our kids' hearts and our kids' minds. It's not about just whipping them into shape every minute of every day. It's about putting little seeds into their heart, watering them, watching them grow. That's nurturing. That's admonition. It takes time. It does. This is not something that's going to happen in a week. It's not something that's going to happen in a year. You can't just decide to be better in this area and then go a week and expect it to be perfect. No, this takes a lifetime. And this takes your entire kid's childhood, from the time that they're born until the time they get married, until the time they leave the house. You're going to be pouring yourself into your children. So rearing good kids is not for the lazy. It's not. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of mental stamina, a lot of emotional stamina. And, especially I feel like as parents get older, they have a tendency to kind of relax a little bit because they have had a good product, maybe they've raised, like, I'm almost raised half of my kids. And so far, I'm very happy with how they've turned out. But I can't forget that I have 4 other ones left to raise. Now, I will say Allison is 15, so she's only 3 years away from being an adult. And I just adore her. And well, I adore all my kids, obviously. But she is also just someone who I want to be like when I'm old enough, when I'm older. She is, she's hilarious. And so far, so good. I think if you get to the heart of things, if you have a relationship with your kids and you have their hearts, it's going to be okay. But I have to remember that, okay, Allie's 3 years away from being 18, but then Alana's only 11, and Kelly is only 6, and Hannah is only 4. So I still have those 3 left to raise pretty much the rest of the way. And we have to stay on top of things as moms. We are the managers of the home, and we see what goes on. We're with our kids almost every minute of every day. So we know and we can see red flags when they come up, and we can see things that maybe aren't quite right with our children's attitudes or their heart or whatever. Maybe we have a kid that's more bent towards worldly things. Why is that? Have they been spending too much time on YouTube? Have they been, spending too much time on a tablet? Have they been spending too much time on electronics in general? And we need to cut back. I've noticed a big shift. If I start seeing bad attitudes, I will cut back big time on screen time or cut back on electronics. And then usually about a week or 2, it straightens up. And then I'll let them start introducing it a little bit at a time. But then if I see that coming back, I'll pull back again. So we kind of watch for those things. Realize that when you have little kids, especially if they're strong-willed, you're in a season where you need to spend a lot of time rearing them and training them. It's going to be hard. And sometimes you are the one who needs the prayers for your mental stamina, your emotional stamina, because it can be very hard having a child who's in the stages of testing you at every turn, who is constantly pushing boundaries and constantly questioning you and constantly saying no and refusing to do things. And then you have to discipline, and it can be an exhausting cycle. And I feel like for my kids, this is kind of overnight. Something usually happens where there's a sudden shift, and suddenly you're not taking them out of church anymore to deal with them throwing fits in the middle of church. Suddenly they can sit through an entire church service. Suddenly, they're not pushing boundaries with you as much, and they accept it when you say no. Suddenly, and it's always right around 4.5 for my kids is when it happens. And it is like, okay, I can breathe now. Have you ever been there? Okay, whew, I can breathe now. But that's not to say that, every battle has been fought and won, right? So you still have that strong will. They've learned now that mom and dad are the boss, are in charge, but you still have to stay on top of things, right? So like birth until the age of 10 is so important, I feel. It really is very defining. That's why you'll find that when people adopt, if they are able to adopt a baby who has just been in horrible situations, it usually goes a lot better for them. But let's say they adopt a 4-year-old who's been raised in a very abusive home. There are a lot of problems already, even by the age of 4. And when I say problems, I mean baggage they have to work through. There's a lot of baggage. That child is going to need a lot of therapy. That child is going to need a lot of love and guidance and support. And it's going to be almost an uphill battle versus getting a baby that's a newborn, never been in that situation. So 0 to 10 is so important and so informative, and you're kind of laying the groundwork for them as an adult. After 10, spanking should be far and few between. So is it your right as a parent to spank your child who lives in your home up until they're even 20 or 22? Sure. Your home, you make the rules, go for it. But should you still have to do it? Then should you still have to do it at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22? I've heard some parents brag that they spanked their child at 22. That's like, I was married and had 2 kids by then. And that would be like me spanking Jason, which is really weird. Um, so that's not the question. The question is not, is it your right as a parent? No, the question is, should you still have to do it then? No, absolutely not. If you've been laying the groundwork right and you have their heart, by the time they're 10 for my kids, that's pretty much done. You should be able to look at your child and fix their attitude, fix the direction they're headed with a look. Like, for me, it's the eyebrow and the snap. You know, the eyebrow goes up and the snap, they know. They know, okay, mom's not happy. And most of the time they'll just, straighten up. And yeah, sure, a 10-year-old can be spanked. Sure, a 14-year-old can be spanked. But as the parent, I would be asking them, why are we still to this point? Really? Why are we still to this point where I have to spank you like a 2-year-old, like a 4-year-old, like a 6-year-old? Why are we still at this point? So, yeah, it's your right, but should you still have to? If you have to, there's probably a problem. There's some technique that needs to be tweaked. There's something that, and I'm talking about the parents that have been Christians the entire time since the kid was born and raised in that home. I'm not talking about someone that was saved when they had teenagers. That's obviously even going to require a totally different approach. I'm talking about the ones that have been saved since their babies were born and since they raised them in a Christian home. That's what I'm talking about. Don't go over the top when you are dealing with a strong-willed child and a lot of times parents who do this, who go over the top and go into these long marathons where they're going to break their kid's will, it's a matter of pride. They feel as if their kid throwing a fit is making them look bad as parents. And so, by golly, they're going to show this kid a thing or two. And in doing so, they destroy a lot of relationship between them and their child. They cause bitterness. They go over the top with harsh punishments, excessive punishments. They're going to cause a lot of bitterness and a lot of anger. So just be aware of that. Are you going over the top in an effort to preserve your reputation as being the hardcore Parent of the Year award who has perfectly inline ducks and perfect little robots who obey their every command? Or are you interested in your child's heart? Do you want to get to the bottom of why they consistently are disobeying you? Because there might be more to it than just they're trying to make you look bad. There might be something going on that you need to address. I remember with the Ruby Frankie story, when they got their free trip to Disney World, Chad was not cooperating and he was acting out pretty badly in the videos and things. Well, Ruby Frankie just came down with an iron fist, like, you don't get to go to Disney World now. And she made him stay in the hotel room because it was making her look bad to her viewers. It was destroying the image that she was trying to put across to her viewers. And in doing so, she missed the heart of why he was even acting out. He was acting out because it was ridiculous. They basically had like these wet ones wipes that they were getting paid to promote. And they had to keep doing these videos where they were using wet ones on like everything. So every aspect of that trip was filmed and he was just over it. He just wanted to go on a trip with his family and not be filmed every little thing and not have to have perfectly pasted on smiles and appear to be perfect and all this stuff. So the heart of the issue was she was damaging her relationship with her kids in the process of coming down with an iron fist. So remember that most of the child rearing lies on mom, especially if she is a stay-at-home parent. And so you're kind of setting the tone in the home. If you're yelling and it's chaos, that's going to make an impression on your kids. And also when it comes to just being consistent with things, you're going to need to be more consistent than dad because dad's working a job. Dad's not in the home 24/7 like you are. So you're going to be the one that needs to enforce and even enforces what dad wants enforced. When my husband and I started the church almost 14 years ago, it was very important to him that our children's education was very important to him because he had seen a lot of missionaries and a lot of church planters who started the church and then the education kind of fell by the wayside because the whole family is involved and they're all helping and everything. And he did not want that. So his main priority for me at the time was that I continued to run the home, keep the home, and make sure that our kids did school. And so I knew that that was his priority. And so I made that my priority. And it's been my priority for 14 years because that's when I became a homeschool mom. So for 14 years, it's been a very imperative that my kids just know they're doing school, they're going to get school done. There's just no question. There's no slacking off. There's no just skipping here and there. They get up, they get their chores done, and they do school. That's what we do. And that was my husband's priority. So I'm running the home when he's gone. So the things that are important to him need to get done. And it's the same way in your home. You're running the home while your husband's gone. So do what your husband wants. If it's imperative to him that you have good, healthy meals every day, make that your goal to have good, healthy meals. If he wants it on the table at a certain time, make it your goal. And we have so many things that make that easy. Crock pots, instant pots, slow cooks. I mean, everything. It's easy to just throw stuff in crock pots and have a meal ready to go. But specifically when it comes to channeling their will, how do we channel that strong will into good things or down good paths? Well, there's some things that we as moms need to teach them. And this goes along with training. Training a child in the way he should go is not just about spanking them for every infraction. So many parents think if I just have this checklist and number one is spank for every infraction, beat the fire out of them, go over the top with the discipline, I'm going to raise great children. Wrong. There's so much more. There's so much more than just giving them a swat when they do bad things. Number one, teach them to stand against sin. Teach them what sin is. I just had this conversation with Hannah because I'm setting the groundwork for when she realizes that she needs to be saved. And around 4 is, obviously their whole life they're in church and we teach them, but around 4, 3 and 4 is when we start having serious conversations about this kind of thing. And we don't push it with our kids. Most of the time we wait until they start asking us questions. And then when it comes to salvation, we ask, we don't bring it up, push it at all. We wait until they come to us and they are serious and they're serious about it and they want to know. And then sometimes they'll be like, oh, okay. And then they'll go on their little way. But then a week later, they come back. So I want to know more about this. And then we'll tell them more. They go on their way. And then they'll come back. I want to get saved. I need to get saved. And that's when we know that the Holy Spirit's been working in their heart and they're ready to call upon the Lord for salvation. So then we go through the whole thing. We explain it all again. Now, my kids, it's going to be a little different because they go soul winning with us a lot. And they've actually been there kind of playing around, on the grass while we're soul winning. But they're hearing dad give the gospel or they're hearing mom give the gospel to someone. So that groundwork is already set. But teach them to stand against sin. So we talk to them about what is sin and what's not. Teach them to stand against injustice. My husband and I are both firstborns, and we tend to defend those who are near and dear to us. And we tend to try to right injustices. And it's something that we're trying to teach our kids to do too. Teach them to stand up for their family and friends if they're being bullied, etc. Teach them that good things in life aren't easy. And I've often told my boys this and my girls this, raising good kids is not easy. It's very difficult. It's very hard, but it's doable. You can do it. Having a good marriage sometimes isn't easy. It's sometimes hard in this world where there's so many temptations and so many things to steal our attention, maybe from our spouse or whatever, but the good things in life aren't easy. If it's good, it's probably going to be hard to attain. So it's hard to have a good marriage in today's world. It's hard to raise good kids in today's world. It's hard to be a faithful church member in today's world. It's hard to be faithful even to the Lord and to not give in to everything that's going on. But it's hard, but it's good. So teach them that good things in life aren't easy. Teach them to stick out uncomfortable things. And as parents, this can make, especially moms, this can make us uncomfortable when our kids are uncomfortable. But realize that sometimes they need to learn to endure hardships. And this could be something simple like take them camping and it's a little cold, or they get a little wet, or they're a little out of their comfort zone, or they get a little hot. One of the camps that we go to, I was just telling Michelle about this from our church, but one of the things that they do is they encourage, it's very much, obviously, I'm Baptist, I'm IFB. I believe in two genders and two genders alone. And so this camp is very much about promoting femininity for girls and promoting masculinity for boys. So one of the things that they do is they have boxing for the boys. And it's really cool seeing because anyone can watch. So they have like this big circle, this ring where everyone stands around and watches. And they have two boys get in there. They try to pair them up by size and stuff. And they do the mouth guard. Do they do the mouth guard? I think they might. Mouth guard, helmet, all that stuff, whatever. And then the boxing gloves. And you can kind of see it. Sometimes the boys are terrified because they've never done something like this. They're used to like boxing on a screen, right? Not boxing literally. And so they're terrified and they'll be like crying, because these are primary junior boys. So they're like 7, 8, right? And so they get in there and they're like crying, but everyone's like, yeah, you can do it. Come on, get in there, do it. And they have a referee with a whistle and he does it. And then that same boy that was crying, maybe he emerges the victor. And just seeing the look on his face after he's the victor, I don't know, it's such a good feeling because, that's what men need. Men need to fight battles and boys need to fight battles and they need to be the victor sometimes and they need to have that victory and just seeing the boost of confidence it gives them. And then they're like, yeah, let's do it again. Even if they got knocked around a little bit, they're like, let's get back out there and do it again. So it's really neat just sitting back and observing that. And it's going to camps like that helped me as a mom when I wanted to maybe coddle my boys. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. No, they need to be strong. They need to be willing to get into a ring and box with another man. They need to be willing to do this. So my boys also went to something called man camp, which was football camp. And that was the same thing. It was promoted. Masculinity is promoted. That's like all that's promoted at that camp. Some liberal feminists might call it toxic masculinity, but it really helped my boys be strong. And some of the preaching there really, shaped their convictions. And some of the things that they went through as far as physical things there really helped them endure hardship, and football camp's not easy and all the stuff, all the exercises and things that they put them through. And I think stuff like that is good for boys. And I think just your kids getting out of their comfort zone is good for them. And it really helps, especially if they're strong-willed, that really helps them. It really helps them because that strength is being exercised in things. I really saw Chloe last year just blossom under going to the camp and having a lot of hard things put on her plate. She had to be on her feet like 15 hours a day and just serving other people and ministering. And she really grew a lot in 3 months. And it's something that I encourage all of, parents, just have your kids step out of their comfort zone a little bit and have them around the right people. That's the thing. I fully trust 100% the people who are in leadership at these things that we go to. I've known them almost my whole life, and they're just great, great Christians. And they respect the parents' authority in the home very much, and they never would do anything that would go over the parents' authority. And I really admire that and respect that. So I fully trust them with my child, when Chloe's there helping at the camp and different things like that. So yeah, teach them all that to say, teach them to stick out on uncomfortable things. That's interesting, Ron. Ron said banana mayonnaise sandwiches are easy to make and those are good. I would disagree with you there. They might be easy to make. I will agree with you there. Are they good? I would disagree with you there. So that's so funny. Nicole, you're funny. Teach them to be good dads and good moms and good friends and good church members. Teach them to use that strength into something, putting it into something that's productive and something that's worthwhile. Teach them to be hard workers. A lot of strong-willed kids, they need to be physically into something, physically active. I've often thought it was interesting that many of my strong-willed children, they needed some kind of outlet, whether that was like for Chloe right now, it's running. She's really gotten into running. She's gotten into running 5Ks and different things. And it's good for her energy. Tommy's always been very active and he's also a runner. Maybe running has some kind of correlation. My husband's also a runner. So I am not a runner. I hate running. Um, but, whether that's an outlet such as sports, going to the gym, having a hobby like that, I think that's good to kind of channel that. For boys, that might be softball or, our kids need to be active. Oftentimes, I think we create a lot of problems for our children by, one, just not having them active enough, not making them go outside enough. They're too bored. They're playing video games all day, so they're going to pick a fight with their sister. And a lot of these situations are one kind of our own making. And so if you learn to channel these different strengths into different areas, they're just going to be better, well-rounded, balanced kids. Teach them to be hard workers. Teach them to have, oh, I was like, what are you talking about? He said, those are good. When you said good things don't come easy, I get you. So banana mayonnaise sandwiches in his mind are good, and those are easy to make. Gotcha. I guess context always matters. That's another lesson for another day. But teach them to have character. So it's easy in this world to drink and do drugs. And when, every other person is doing drugs and drinking and doing all sorts of things, it's not easy to restrain from those things. Especially in one of our friends in Ireland, everyone starts drinking there. Like drink is huge in Ireland. And everyone starts drinking there from the time that they're like 17 or something. And so for my Irish friend, it's been a lot more difficult for her boys not drinking because it's literally a part of Irish people's lives from the time that they're like 16 or 17. So oftentimes they might go to a function, but then leave when the drinking starts or, something like that. So they've had to remove themselves from different situations when that's going on. And it can be hard when with peer pressure. That's why having a strong will is not a bad thing in the right situation. And it would be this way with alcohol. I'm 44 and I've never had a drink of alcohol. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never done drugs. The only man I've ever been with is my husband. And I think in today's world, that's kind of rare. So it takes a strong-willed person to be able to pull that off. And that's why I have, like I said, a different approach when it comes to having a strong-willed child, because in today's world, you're almost going to need to have a strong will to resist different things that pop up, whether that's alcohol or temptation, not losing your purity before you get married. Those are all things that are really hard not to do, especially when it's being promoted and encouraged and accepted by everyone in society. Teach them purity and to have character to resist temptation. My husband and I often call this time, that Jason's in right now. He's got 3 weeks left to go. And he's been engaged quite a while, like 8 or 9 months. That's a long time in the Baptist world. But we often call that time the testing ground. Okay. It's going to test to see your character. It's good for you during that time to learn to resist temptation, to learn to say no to your flesh when your flesh is screaming that it wants something else. It's a very, very good time for Christian young people to go through, because there's going to be times after they get married where they're going to have to refrain from physical affection right after she's had a baby, during certain times of the month. And just because that time comes up, those 6 weeks or whatever, he can't be going out and having affairs with women because he's never learned to just control his desires. So this time between engagement and marriage for our kids has been a time of training, a time of testing. And our kids, it's a little easier in the fact that they always have someone with them, whether that's a sibling or a parent. So that does make it a little bit harder, but when there's a will, there's a way. You can't just say, well, I'm going to put these safeguards in my kid's life and then it will never happen to my kid. No, if a child wants to get away with something, they're going to find a way to get away with something. They're going to find a way to bypass all the chaperones. They're going to find a way to sneak around and do something. So you have to have that desire in their heart as well. But that just comes down to training them from the time they're young. Like I even have to talk with Kelly and Hannah now about how when you're not married, there's certain things. Because Kelly the other day, she said, why can't Liz and Jason kiss? I believe is what she asked me. And I was like, well, here's the thing, Kelly. Do I go and I kiss the men at church? And she said, no. And I said, who do I kiss? And she said, Daddy. And I said, and you know why I kiss Daddy? And she said, because he's your husband. I said, exactly. You know why I'm not going around and kissing all the men at church? Because they're not my husband. And you know why Jason and Liz shouldn't kiss? Because they're not married. And so from the time they're young, we're telling our kids this. And so they're getting it in their hearts and their minds. Oh, okay, I save all that physical stuff for after I'm married. So, and we've done that with all of our kids, like Tommy on down. We did that with all of our kids. So yes. Yeah, Ron, your boys, they are like coming to mind when I'm thinking about like all the activities they have for them there, because they do softball, they do boxing, they do, swimming. It's so physical at this camp. And I was thinking of the boxing and I'm like, oh man, Rhett especially, he's going to be like, what did I get myself into? And it's not a bad thing. It's because they've just never done it. It can be a little overwhelming when they've never done this. And then all of a sudden they're like having to throw boys into barrels and things, which is one of the activities they do American Eagle, where they go and they like grab balls and they're grabbing. I don't know if they'll do that with the younger kids. They do that at teen camp and boy, that is fun to watch. All these teen boys going at it. But yeah, no, it's good for any boy that's been, homeschooled and is used to being indoors for a lot of the time. So they're going to be getting a lot of the same things that he grew up with. So yeah, it might be a little bit of a shock, but almost every boy that we've ever taken, by the end, they're like, yeah, let's do this again next year, because there's something in men that they need that competition. They need to fight another man. They need to get out their physical aggression. God put that in them. It's called testosterone. And, for girls, not so much there because of estrogen, but there are differences between the sexes, believe it or not, no matter what the world tries telling you. And that's why doing stuff like this is good for your kids, to get them, push them out of their comfort zone. And as parents, we know our kids the best. So teach them to talk like a Christian, use that strong will. And, for me, I've always trained my kids. It shows a lack of intelligence when you're just using profanity like every drunken sailor. Okay. It shows a lack of intelligence. I love words. I love words like grotesque and angst and, all these fancier words, I guess. It's so funny because sometimes I'll be texting Amanda and she'll be like, be right back. I got to go Google that word. And then she'll literally go Google the word that I said. But you can kind of tell if someone's a reader or not, because they will use words that are a little bit archaic to people, but, cool sounding words that maybe have different meanings or something. You can tell that who's a reader and who's not. So I'll tell my kids, there's in the home, obviously no profanity. And I try to train them. Christians talk a certain way and the world talks a certain way. And it takes a lot of strong will, especially as a man in the workforce, to not use language, because everyone uses language. And I teach my kids to talk like a Christian, there's worldly talk and then there's talking like a Christian. And all of my boys in whatever secular job that they have been at, they are noticed because of their language. People will ask them, why don't you cuss? Why don't you use certain words? And then they're able to tell them about being a Christian. And, I don't cuss because I'm a Christian, and just act like, yeah, duh, you're a Christian. You don't cuss, isn't that just how it is? Not so much anymore, but in our house it is. So it can sometimes take a strong will not to fall into the patterns of the world. Teach them there are some things Christians just don't do. You know, for us, for McMurtry's, that's drinking, smoking, gambling, whatever. Just Christians don't do that, and no one in our house is going to do that. And then just remember, last of all, you lead by example when it comes to this, especially when you have strong-willed children. I think one of the reasons that we've had so many dynamic personalities in my own 8 children is because I'm a firstborn married to a firstborn. And we have had a lot of children that have very strong personalities, and they come by it honestly. It's in their genetics, it's in their DNA. And so we as parents have had to show our children self-control. We've had to show them how to take a stand when no one else will. One thing that my boys and my girls respect so much about their dad is they know no one alive can call Tommy McMurtry a coward. My man will face anyone to the face, and he will not back down. He will stand in what he knows is true, and he will not cower. That's just not part of who he is. And he has shown my boys how to be that way in their own lives. So, show them how to control your mouth, whether that comes to not yelling, not using profanity, talking like a Christian versus not talking like a Christian. Our kids learn what's going on in the home. If you ever hear someone talking and maybe it's a 10-year-old and they're just using filthy language and every other word is an F-bomb or a B word or an S word or whatever profanity is out there, it's not going to be too hard to figure out where they got it from. Okay. Because especially with kids, what we do in what we do in moderation, our children do in excess. So they're just copying what they've heard at home. They're just copying what you've had on the TV. They're just copying that. So they come by it honestly. You show your kids how to serve God even when it's hard. And my kids gained so much respect for their dad and me, especially with the whole mask thing. They earned so much respect with their dad though when it came to a whole church thing when COVID was around. And when they saw that he took the route he did with how to handle church services and how to handle local government. And contrary to popular opinion, there's this rumor out there that we made the news for not shutting down, and that's totally not true. That was a church on the other side of town that actually made news for not shutting down. But no, we actually had policemen show up, but they told us that we were fine to continue going on. They had to show up because a Karen called and said that we were having services, but they just literally walked in and said, "Have a great day, folks. Keep carrying on," and then left because they knew it was unconstitutional to shut down churches. So that's the gist of it. Our local government was very good in working with us. They had told my husband, "We are not following Pritzker's rules. We understand that it's unconstitutional to even have state police involved in these matters and to shut down places of worship for this." So they knew that we were in our constitutional rights to continue carrying on. But even when it came to the whole wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, I did not believe in this, and I was not going to go along with something I did not believe in. And sometimes, almost all the time, anytime we went shopping, my children and I were the only ones not wearing masks. And it can feel a little weird. It can feel a little weird when everyone's staring at you. And I had multiple people come up to me and they said, "How did you get away with not wearing a mask?" And I said, "I just don't wear one." And they said, "Okay, that's pretty cool." And they would take their mask off and put it in their purse and go on along their way. So our bravery inspired other people's bravery, and which I thought was funny. But most people they don't realize what law is. They don't realize that you don't have to go along with every whim of the government, that there are things such as constitutional rights. And I'm not saying the whole mask thing because businesses, they do have a right to enforce things and you have the right to not go there, if the business is doing that. But Walmart had said they were not going to throw people out not wearing them. So I went into Walmart and the worker would say, "Do you want a mask?" And I would say, "No, thank you." And they would say, "Okay." And then no one would bother me. And we just went along our way. And was it a little conspicuous? Yes, because we were getting a lot of looks. And, I was told if I posted about it, I remember I was told that People hoped I died. They hoped my kids all got sick and died because I would not wear a mask. But my thought was, if the masks are to protect, why are you wearing a mask? If you're wearing a mask, shouldn't you be protected? That's my thought. So, anyways, that was a total tangent. But I'm just saying there's been different instances in our lives where our kids have seen us do the uncomfortable things. And that's part of where my strong will comes in. I've used my strong will to take stands against things that I don't believe in or against what I perceive as injustices. And that's why with this platform, even me having this platform, you have to have a certain strong will. Because there are many people that have tried to get me to shut it down because they don't like my advice on the home. And they don't like it that I firmly believe that in no way should a woman ever be beaten or hit, whether or not it's consensual or not. And I stand firmly against that. And I will continue to stand firmly against that. And I will continue to make my opinion known. So and I don't care if people want to shut me up and get me to stop. That's where that strong will comes in a good way. And by the way, I also believe in biblical roles and me honoring my husband, submitting to my husband, and my husband is fully on board with me. Having this show, promoting the things that I promote, we are in complete and 100% agreement. So yeah, I use my strong will. I try to use my strong will in life for good things. And just channel your kid's strong will. It's not a bad thing. When you have a strong-willed child, please, 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 please do not try to break their spirit. Do not try to break their will. Do not try to pulverize them into these little robotic things, because when they turn 18, I'm telling you, maybe even before they turn 18, you are going to put so much resentment in their heart. Please, there's so much bad teaching out there on just going over the top with disciplines and how you just need to beat them more and hit them harder. And it's so harmful to the family. It's so harmful to the family. It's so harmful to your kids' hearts, and you're not getting to the heart of the matter. Get to the heart of the matter. Why are they disobeying you? Why are they lying? Why are they sneaking around? Why are they doing these things? Instead of just taking your anger out on your kid, get to the heart of the matter of why they're doing what they're doing. And you're going to raise a much happier children. You're going to raise balanced children, and you're going to raise children that know what they believe and why they believe it. And then even if the whole world is against them, if they know it's right and and they want to serve the Lord, they're going to continue to serve the Lord because you channeled that will into productivity, and you channeled that will towards good things and towards the things of the Lord, and, towards all the good stuff. So anyways, I hope that helps. I've been there with a strong-willed child. I know it can be frustrating. But just remember, God gave you that child, that personality for such time as this. And I firmly believe in this world and day that we live in, you're going to need a strong will to survive as a Christian. You're going to need a strong will to do great things for God. You're going to need a strong will to resist temptations. You're going to need a strong will to serve the Lord and continue on for the rest of your days. So just remember that God gave him that personality for a reason, and just try to channel it into good things, and it will all be good. Chloe's about to turn 18, and believe it or not, people looking at her now, especially in our church, are like, what in the world? Like, how she was strong-willed? Oh, yes. Chloe very much wanted things done her way, only her way, no one else's way. And we just had to channel that into good areas of her life. And she is a beautiful young lady with a beautiful heart for the Lord, and a beautiful heart for her parents, and a beautiful heart for her church and everyone in it. So, it'll be okay. Hang in there. And Sunday, I'm going to do a crunchy hour with Nicole again. We're going to specifically touch on balancing hormones. So I'm going to have it available we're going to record it here at church, and then I'll have it available for the 24 hours, the next 24 hours for members only. So if you want to become a member for 99 cents a month, I started at my price is rock bottom. You'll get the chance to watch that first. And then we're also going to be doing a giveaway next week for a book about specifically balancing hormones. I think it'd be a great book to win. So look for that. And I hope you guys have a good week. Go love your husbands. First of all, love God, love your husbands, love your kids.